I'm Dan.
And I'm Alex, and welcome back to On Air. How are you guys? We hope that everyone is keeping well, and thank you once again for joining us wherever you are listening, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. We're pleased to be with you. How are you, Dan?
I am great. I'm so excited for today's episode because we have a very special guest who we couldn't be more honored to have on the podcast. We are anticipating a very interesting, in-depth conversation about an airline that we are big fans of on the podcast. What do we call them, Alex?
They are the little airline that could, and I'm pleased, as Dan said, that we will be joined in this episode by Martin Gauss. He is the CEO of Air Baltic, the Latvia national airline. It is an airline that has this really wide reach, including into markets that they don't even fly to, because of the solid brand that this airline has built. They've got great PR. They're all over social media. Their aircraft is at almost every air show on Earth. Wherever Airbus want to debut the A220 and show it off as some kind of Airbus masterpiece, when we all know it's a Bombardier masterpiece, it's Air Baltic right there, front and center, ready with one of their aircraft to show off what's good. So they're an interesting airline. We like them. And I think we're going to have a good chat with Martin.
So should we give some slight previews of the topics we're going to be covering today, Alex?
Yeah, so there has been, this is a pretty timely sit down with Martin because there's been nothing short of a scandal in terms of the public perception of what they believe to be happening at Air Baltic with finances that has had the CEO, Martin, come out fighting. He knows, he says, the truth of the state of play at Air Baltic. He has the facts. He has the knowledge as to what the plans are for the airline and where they are, the challenges that they are coming out from and the challenges that they will be facing ahead and how they're going to navigate all of that. And so with that, this will be Martin's time to come to us and give us a little explanation as to what has been happening locally that caught a little bit of the global attention as well, but also what the plans are for this airline, because it is one of the few independent airlines in Europe. And you know, guys, that we've spoken extensively about how if you are a sitting duck as an independent airline in Europe, it is only a matter of time until the likes of IAG, Lufthansa Group, Air France, KLM come and swoop you up. I think we are very, very close to that reality with Air Baltic. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens a few years down the road. We've spoken so much about airline consolidation in Europe on the podcast. And okay, if we could make a wish, which airline group they would join if they ended up being bought out by an airline group, what would we say? I would personally, I think now the best airline group in Europe is Air France KLM in terms of...
You always say this.
I do because... Okay, let's be fair. Paris is not a great place to transit, but
exactly. So that's like the your premise for it being the best airline group falls apart at the first hurdle because you say their hub is terrible.
No, because the three big airline groups in Europe are Lufthansa Group, IAG, which is British Airways, Aer Lingus, Iberia, and a few others, and then we have Air France KLM. And I just think you're going to see, guys, in just a few days, I'm posting my latest updated review of Air France business class. And I think once you see that and once you've experienced even KLM on intra-European flights and you see how so many of their aircraft offer a much wider range of comfort options. So you can choose to sit in something that's a much more premium version of an economy seat in the forward rows with much more legroom and with good charging on so many of their aircraft, which is not offered still on most European carriers. I would say overall now they are definitely the most premium of the three European airline groups.
But isn't that arguably because Air France KLM is basically just Air France and KLM? Oh, and Transavia.
And
That's
now and now SAS. Sorry, which...
Oh, forgive me for forgetting SAS. How will I ever repay? That's well, I don't need to say much more on that. But
yeah.
But if we compare it, for example, to the likes of IAG. So to answer your earlier question, you said, who do I think would be interesting to see kind of Air Baltic, be a part of? I like the idea of IAG rather, and I say that because I just think IAG are much better at having individual identities to their airlines. British Airways is incredibly different to Iberia. Iberia's not, not anything like Aer Lingus. Yes, when something goes wrong, this is a trend in all airline groups. They all pretend they don't know each other. I mean, it always makes me laugh how they've got each other's flight numbers on each other's flights, and they're all in bed with each other, and it's all, we're one big family. And the moment Iberia cancel a flight with a British Airways flight number, you go to BA and they're like, who? Iberia. What? You need to call that airline you're speaking. I'm like, I thought it's your sister. You've got the same flight number. You share that. Oh, okay. We're pretending we don't know each other. I just think there's more room for that. I worry, with Lufthansa, that they're going to be like, this is Lufthansa. You have now grey slimline seats and Recaro and, everything.
Exactly. I mean, just in defense of Air France KLM, again, I think that those two brands are extremely separate as well. And
but that's because the group only consists of basically two airlines. I know. Barely a group.
And SAS is now not even fully a member. They're just partly owned by Air France KLM. And of course, SAS is not on the level, I would say, of Air France. And, well, KLM is debatable. But anyway.
Do you think when we speak about SAS, people initially feel that we're, SAS, like they're imagining like a combat squad, like everyone in black armor with helmets and big guns, like SAS?
I think the test of a true av geek is when you hear SAS, you think of an airline rather than whatever you're talking about. Because I mean, I wasn't like, I was like 15 years old when I found out that SAS could be anything but an airline.
I'm just sorry, I got distracted because I'm just reading a comment. Someone has written in and they have said, can you guys figure out what the link is between excellent views of runways and aircraft landing from various IKEAs around the world? That is so true. IKEAs are very often placed near to hub airports, right? Or near to airports in general. And so typically the IKEA cafe, land of the meatballs, you know that only too well, despite you being vegan, you grew up there. You tend to get these amazing views. And okay, off the top of my head, there's a good IKEA, massive one next to Athens Airport, has a very good view of the approach. Malaga has an excellent IKEA at the end of the runway. Literally, aircraft are on finals, the last 5 seconds of the flight. Actually, I remember the first time Emmy flew out to me in southern Spain. She flew BA from Gatwick. Goodness. And when she was arriving at like 11 in the morning, I think I had got there early, so we waited in IKEA, and I watched her A319 come over the car park, and it's like 100, 50, 40, 40, 40, 40, 50, and it goes around. She starts climbing, and I'm like, oh my God, not with Emmy on board. Like you feel such responsibility when it's a friend coming and you organize the flights and whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, she's going to be freaking out, because she was totally fine. I mean, she's a police officer. She's used to,
seen worse stuff.
Instability.
Yeah. Also, famously, Newark has an IKEA right next to the runway. Newark Airport beside New York, which, you always see it when you're landing and taking off. I think it just comes down to airports normally being surrounded by logistics and more like warehouse kind of areas, which is, of course, where IKEA fits in. So without further ado, let's welcome Martin to the podcast.
Let's do it. Well, today we're delighted to say that we are joined on air by the CEO of Air Baltic, Martin Goss. Air Baltic is often referred to on this podcast as the little airline that could, and that is because the fast-growing Latvian carrier is responsible for around 2% of Latvia's GDP. It's winning awards everywhere. It has developed Riga as its little main hub. Dan and I have both been to Riga, and it now flies to over 70 destinations, which is a little more than when both Dan and I had flown on Air Baltic, including London, Dubai, Malaga, Baku, Rome, and yes, even Gothenburg. Martin, welcome to On Air with Dan and Alex.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about that little airline, which is not so little anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we're going to talk about your growth plans as well. But first, we want to start a little bit with you, Martin. You started your career in 1992 as a Boeing 737 pilot. And You've worked in all types of positions since then, in management, of course. Did you know from a very young age that you wanted to work in aviation?
No, I actually wanted to be an economist and I started studying it, but then I read an advert in a German financial magazine and it was talking about what a pilot earns. And I changed my mind immediately and I said, I become a pilot, not knowing what it would mean. I then paid for my education, was pretty tough start, but I was very lucky 2 years later when I had my pilot license that at that time a company which was founded by British Airways in Germany in 92 employed me as one of the first co-pilots on the Boeing 737. And I did not know when 2 years before I became a pilot that I would be in this industry.
Yeah, it's quite an inspiring journey to go from not knowing about the industry to being a pilot and then now being in management, right?
What was that? I mean, we very rarely hear about the exact reason, or I guess the kind of trigger as to that moment when a pilot actually moves into the corporate side of the airline and then kind of work your way up through different management positions. Again, is that because previously you wanted, you were studying and it was a different direction? So is that what kind of led you to move away from the cockpit and into a bit more of the corporate side?
I did not know that. I was a first officer and I had a lot of free time. I wanted to fly, get hours because that was the only thing I wanted. And we were like a startup company with only a few Boeings based in Berlin. And the chief pilot asked me, I was smart on the computer at that time already, had a bit more knowledge than the average person. And he said, could I type the minimum equipment list into a digital document? So just type the whole minimum equipment list of an aircraft. And I did that. I don't know how many hundreds of hours I typed.
Wow.
But that basically was my entrance by just typing a document in 1992. And then a year later, I already got the responsibility to lead a small team, and I was in charge of the documentation and publication. So that was basically the entry. Over the years, British Airways had a very dedicated program where you had management training, and I climbed the ladder parallel being a pilot, a captain, a training captain, an examiner. But in parallel, I was always doing more and more management task. It was not planned by myself, nor was there anybody behind who planned it. It just developed. But I have to say, until today, I'm always trying to reach for the next thing I can do better. And it has worked out very well.
That's really interesting. And so what brought you to Latvia? Because, of course, you're from Germany. I understand that Munich is home, if I remember correctly, from when we last met.
Yeah, Munich is home, which is a place where I have 3 kids, where the kids were raised. But today I would say home when I open the door is also Latvia, because I spent most of my time here, 13 years already. So for me, difficult as I'm traveling a lot. But opening the door of my apartment in Riga, Latvia, feels for me as home as when I occasionally are in Munich, where members of the family are. What brought me to Latvia? Typically, a headhunter said on a golf tournament, actually a Boeing golf tournament, to me, would I be ready to talk to a company in Northern Europe to potentially work for them? That's how it started, and out of that talk, the CEO position evolved in 2011.
Yeah.
So it was just a talk with somebody, a headhunter, who then established the contact, and I was one of the candidates, and then got offered the job.
And had you traveled to Riga or to Latvia prior to you making the move there?
No, not at all. I was crossing the airspace as a pilot once, so I had a rough idea what it was. But in fairness, I was on a Lufthansa flight from Munich, Frankfurt to Riga, and I, in fairness, took out the onboard magazine to really check which of the 3 Baltic states would be the one I would be touching down. So that was my first time in the city, and I had to reassure myself, where actually is it?
And it's been 13 years now. So as you say, Riga and Latvia feels a little more like home. Air Baltic has grown significantly over the last 13 years and under your leadership. So let's fast forward to where we are with Air Baltic today. This is, as we said, the flag carrier of Latvia that is pretty well known now in several markets, including in markets where Air Baltic has never even kind of flown in its airspace, let alone flown to destinations there. And we'll come to the strong brand that you guys have built shortly. But in terms of the network and the fleet today, how many aircraft do you operate, and destinations? What's that looking like in terms of numbers and growth?
So company size is for aircraft size today is 48 Airbus A220-300s, so only that aircraft today. An order book of 100 of them, so we're doubling in size in the next 5 years with the same aircraft type. We currently operate around 70,000 flights per year. We carry, if you also add the wet lease flying, we do around 7.5 million passengers. Yeah, that's the airline. And if you say how was that brand built, it was built by the team at Air Baltic, but one of the key milestones for that brand building was a decision in 2012 to become the launch customer of an aircraft which wasn't even developed at that time, the CS300, which today is the A220-300. And that decision in 2012 was probably one of my smartest ones, to go for that aircraft, because it made us today the largest operator of that type in the world if we look at the order book.
And I feel like time has really flown by, because I remember being with you guys at the first delivery event in the freezing cold snow in the middle of winter of your first A220, and it was one of the most impressive performances ever. There were singers kind of perched up halfway in the air next to the aircraft. You had a phenomenal light show. It was really setting the bar high when it came to delivery events. And I remember thinking, this is just a relatively small airline. It's impressive. Now I know this was very much consistent with what you would then go on to do in terms of PR and branding and really establishing the name of the carrier.
Yeah. We also have to say, from a passenger comfort perspective, I think everyone is really pleased you chose the A220 or C series back then, because it's a great aircraft from that perspective. I have a question, but I just want to know a detail here, because we're going to get into it a bit more shortly. You're wet leasing some aircraft to Lufthansa Group. Is it correct you're currently wet leasing 14 of your A220s to them, or what's the number?
It fluctuates seasonally, but this summer the peak is 17 aircraft, which we have with Lufthansa Group. We also do it for others, but the Lufthansa Group this year has 17 aircraft.
Okay,
which
so
they use in the different group airlines to help with their capacity needs to transport passengers. That also helps us, because it's our aircraft in our livery. So people see Air Baltic when they book Swiss or Lufthansa, which some people don't like. But what I get now is, if it's Air Baltic, it's very much liked. So we get actually the feedback also from these passengers. They say, wow, super modern aircraft, super friendly crew. So it actually really even works in Lufthansa Group, and I'm very happy for that relation, as it works out very well for us.
that's really great. So you had about 30 aircraft in Air Baltic's fleet directly this summer?
Yes, so right now, even more if we look at the total fleet. But at the size we have now, you always have aircraft going through heavy maintenance checks, which means there's always a few aircraft on the ground. And then, of course, as we still have the shortage of engines, we have occasionally even wet leases flying for ourselves. But if we look into the future, what we intend to do in our business, to have 100 aircraft in 5 years, and engine issues should be over by then. And then 30 of these aircraft are actually earmarked for being in this wet lease out model. So 30% of the fleet should then do that kind of business as we do today. And then 70 aircraft would be in our scheduled operation.
Martin, what's the trade-off you have to make there, where you had said that in a way it benefits Air Baltic and the brand and the reputation when the airline is flying and operating with Swiss and with the Lufthansa Group, and passengers who have booked a Swiss ticket find themselves on an Air Baltic aircraft, and you're saying that many of them are pleasantly surprised, and understandably so, because as we said, it's the A220 is arguably one of the best, or if not the best, short-haul aircraft that can operate within Europe. But on the other side to that, it has left you guys in Riga forced to enter your own leasing agreements with other carriers who don't have as a comfortable or desirable aircraft to operate Air Baltic flight. So if you're flying with the carrier that you're, with Air Baltic that has the O220s, they're flying with Swiss, and meanwhile you end up on a Cockpit or Avion Express. It's not the best. So how do you make that decision? What's the perception been like at home?
That we need to play that ball to Pratt and Whitney, because they give us an outlook for the season, and this year they gave the outlook that we would be having sufficient engines. Then it turns out it's not the case, so we need to take in wet lease ourselves, because otherwise you wouldn't lease out your aircraft to somebody else if you know you have to take another one in. So it's a temporary issue caused due to the engine shortage, and we are unhappy with it, but it's a reality, which I believe will be the case for the next 1 to 2 years before that stops.
Right.
But yeah, there's no other explanation for it, that a unpredictable shortage or a bad planning from Pratt & Whitney as the engine manufacturer, and not fulfilling the forecasts they give to us on how many engines would be available at what time.
Yeah. So I've been tracking some of the Avion Express A320s flying for you, and it seems like it's all types of routes, which led me to an interesting question about what are Air Baltic's most profitable routes as of 2024?
We are not disclosing route results, as you can expect, because we have a lot of competition. But the routes where we fly a lot of passengers, which is the Amsterdams, the Tallinns, the capitals, Paris, Munich, these are also the routes which we like a lot, because they have high passenger volumes, they all year round work very well. But then there's also the Malagas or the Dubais in winter, which work very well for us because they are full, high load factors. So we have 136 routes now, and we have a business plan process which looks at each of the routes each half year, and then new routes entering in the same way. So it's a sophisticated way how we do route selection, as we have a track record of staying on routes pretty long and developing them. But the detailed information about the individual route results, of course, we don't make public.
Yeah, that's fair. The Dubai route is one that's always fascinated me in a sense, because it seems like a bit of an oddball compared to the rest of your network, especially in terms of flight length. And I know Fly Dubai was going to launch flights to the Baltics this winter season, but ended up scrapping that. So the Dubai route is one that Air Baltic sees itself continuing. Is that correct? And you see it having a valuable place for the airline?
Yeah, it has two reasons. First of all, it's a very nice winter destination if you talk about a warm weather destination, because it's safe, warm weather. You have to fly quite long in Europe. You can do Canary Islands, but then there's an even better place, which is Dubai. And it has the Emirates codeshare, which means with one stop you can reach basically all of Southeast Asia, India. And these two elements make it such a popular route for us and a successful route for us. And obviously, Fly Dubai's intention to enter the route is based on that. They wouldn't come on a route like that if they wouldn't see the potential. We have been so successful on the Riga-Dubai route that we also opened the Vilnius-Dubai route. So we're flying it in parallel from two of the Baltic capitals.
That's exciting. So, yeah, as I said, this is quite a long flight. So I'm half American, half Swedish, specifically from New York and Gothenburg. So you currently serve one of the places I'm from, but I know you've commented before that there is solid demand for travel to places like New York from the Baltics, or even Toronto or Washington, D.C. So is there a chance we'll see Air Baltic place an aircraft order for jets that are capable of flying that far?
Not in the foreseeable future, because we haven't made it very clear. Our story where we intend to go to the stock exchange in the future is based on A220-300, that's simplicity. And that aircraft can't reach New York, only with 16 passengers if we would want to do it. To order another type would be going today against the strategy we have for the next 5 years. But I don't say that might not be something one day in the future happens. But on that issue, flying direct to US, I do see the need for the Baltics to have that direct connectivity. And we would love to have somebody doing it, because we could feed that carrier with all the passengers which we bring to Riga Hub. So maybe we are lucky and one day one of the larger American carriers says, okay, we see Riga like Dubrovnik, right? The Delta flying twice to Dubrovnik because there's Games of Thrones. And I always ask the question to Delta, so guys, you're flying to Dubrovnik twice a day. Can you not come to a European capital like Riga at least 3 times a week? But maybe JetBlue, maybe Delta, maybe United, American. I hope one of these carriers does it one day. We're going to fill their aircraft just with the feed we have at the point-to-point traffic from Riga.
Well, we have some of their route network guys and girls as listeners to the podcast, so hopefully they'll pick up on the hints there. We mentioned briefly earlier, so around the world, Air Baltic is pretty famous in aviation. You yourself are regularly in New York or London or Seoul, South Korea, picking up different awards for the Latvian airline. But at home, sometimes the picture can feel a little different. I note that over the last week, there has been some anger in Latvian media and a little bit of criticism around what they cite as lack of transparency to the Latvian taxpayers over decisions, financial decisions that are taken within Air Baltic. Air Baltic, just for some context to the listeners, posted losses for the first half of this year of 88.8 million euros. But revenue is increasing. You are increasing in various other metrics, including your passenger numbers and growth. It comes with heavy overheads, including introducing new aircraft. So we understand that side of the sector, but perhaps that's not being entirely understood by the home market. I mean, are the taxpayers right to be concerned, or do you think that their concerns are simply because they're not fully understanding the business of aviation?
So you started saying there was a little bit of criticism locally. That was not a little bit of criticism, that was a major shitstorm, which happened here 1 week in the social media, public media, and the press. And what it was, as you said, the taxpayer is of the opinion that the investment in Air Baltic in the last 29 years, which was 526 million accumulated, should be paid back to the taxpayer. And it's very difficult to explain that the value of the company is still here. We have an impact of 1 billion euro per year to the GDP. We export, just this last year was 500 million in export. We offer a connectivity transporting 62 million passengers over the last 29 years to Riga and the Baltics. So it's very difficult to offset the arguments of the taxpayer, who, of course, every taxpayer is unhappy with something the government spends. And it comes from that. So it comes from a discussion, a local discussion about using taxpayers' money, which has been used in the past to get the airline into an equity position so that the airline can function. If we now look at our results, we go from record to record. If we look at revenues, EBITDAs, passenger numbers. Yes, the net result, and we report that because we are listed at the stock exchange with a bond. The net result in the half year showed 88.8 million net loss, but it was explained and is even on the website for the interested people. How is it put together, right? It's depreciations, it's a dollar exchange rate, no non-cash items there. We focus on growing EBITDA, growing revenue, growing the airline into profitability. The taxpayer is not paying anything for it. The taxpayer benefits from it. But locally, we had 1 week of a difficult week. But I tell you one thing, it stopped within a minute, all of it, because a drone from a Russian drone fell on a field in Latvia. It was a misguided drone, and it has completely wiped out the discussion about us. So you in the news, you sometimes have that.
Yeah.
Everybody discusses something because there is no other news. And as fast as it came, as fast it stopped.
Well, that's the news cycle for you. I mean, I wondered if, and again, not being in Latvia, but seeing this from afar and trying to establish why there was such anger, specifically over the last week. I wonder if, I noticed some tweets where people were comparing how many airlines across the world, smaller airlines, larger airlines, had perhaps their most profitable year ever, or their most profitable half year ever, as airlines have truly recovered. Do you think that the same can't really be applied to the likes of Air Baltic just because of the sheer number of complications and hurdles that you guys have had to face? Yes, everybody had COVID, but you guys have also had the war in Ukraine on your doorstep.
Yeah, everybody had COVID and the war, also others have the war. So I would not use any of it as an excuse, but you have to see what kind of airline we are. We have transitioned to a single fleet type after COVID, and we have a growth scenario where we double in size. And if you say you go to the capital markets, then you need to show the growth, and with that growth in the future, very strong profitability figures. Otherwise, you cannot do that. And that's what we do. The last year, for example, the net result, I think, was 34 million or so. So even that was a record. But yes, the half-year result and investors have expected that because we have the bond traded, and the bond actually this week has never traded higher than it trades. So the financial world, and this is now not the local people, really understand the business locally. Not everybody has that level of understanding, but again, it was a local. It's local news. If we look at all the countries we serve and the passengers, revenues, by the way, last week also were higher than before. So obviously that negative news did not lead to anybody not booking. The opposite, we had more bookings coming in.
Okay, that's good to hear. You speak a bit about growth, and for those who don't know, Air Baltic has plans to grow to 100 aircraft by 2030, which is quite rapid growth. And looking at, well, first of all, the war in Ukraine is still ongoing, but also the geographic location you're in terms of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia don't have the biggest populations, and you're very close to Scandinavia, which also isn't the most populous part of the world. So where will all this capacity go, and what do you see as the purpose of growing the airline so much?
We have to say so much. 100 aircraft. If you talk to a US carrier, they will say that is little. It looks a lot if you say Air Baltic is coming from Riga, Latvia. But we have no issue at the moment. We are missing aircraft. We would do more if we would have them already. So the 100 aircraft is what we put together as a business plan to show certain revenues and certain productivity figures, passenger figures. But we do not have an issue of scaling that up. If you look at other successful airline models, and ours is a unique model in Europe, looking at Wizz Air, which went to the stock exchange 10 years ago, was a growth story. They are having 500 aircraft coming in. If we look at Ryanair, EasyJet, many models, and especially in the US, there was Breeze set up, just ordering 100 aircraft and say, I'm going to do it. So we see this here as going from 50 to 100, as with the model which we have, wet lease and scheduled flying, based in the Baltics, but also stepping outside as the first step. And then, of course, a successful model will be scaled up. So we're not worried, because at the moment, if we would have 10 more aircraft, they would all be flying.
Okay, that's good to hear. Would that mean expanding on the current business model of Air Baltic, or would we perhaps see more expansion to the as I said, you already fly to Dubai, to the likes of maybe Saudi Arabia eventually, or trying to go a bit further with the fleet you'll have?
No, we focus on the 3 Baltic states. There's still a lot of room to grow here. So we by far do not. We're market leader in Riga with 56% and 28% in Tallinn, but 28%, right? There's a lot of room in Tallinn to grow from the existing market. We only have 16% market share in Vilnius, the other Baltic capital. So these 3 states still need a lot of connectivity. Forecasts say that the Baltic states passenger GDP growth will be 3 times as much as the rest of Europe. So we are in a home market where we will see a better growth than elsewhere, but we have already stepped out of it by having a temporary base in Gran Canaria. We have Tampere. So you will see us growing in the 3 Baltic capitals, strong, but also outside. And we have a very clear plan on how to do that. And then do not forget, we're the only airline in Europe which is a full-blown airline which has business class economy and does wet lease out with the same aircraft and crew. And that is a unique concept which we are explaining, because there is no airline like us doing it. So now the question is, to what scale can such an airline grow? We focus only on the Baltics and Nordics, but there might be people who say such a concept would also work somewhere else.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I just want to go back to something we mentioned a little bit earlier. You specifically called what happened last week a shitstorm. And we noticed that you took a sort of unconventional approach to dealing with that issue, because it's not often we see airline CEOs directly addressing the public using social media like you decided to do on Twitter. So what went into that decision to put yourself out there so publicly like that?
a lot of wrong information and nobody was correcting it, because in the process which we are in, where you're regulated by financial markets, you can't disclose certain numbers, and you cannot say this is right or wrong. So I do not have many followers on X, I think 3,000, so I would not have expected to have a big resonance on it. But actually, I sat down, it was 2 o'clock in the morning in Montreal, as I was there on an Airbus event. And I typed for a couple of hours all these things together, sent it in English, sent it to my PR team and said, can you translate that in Latvian, please? Because there needs to be somebody who says the truth. And it was done, and we published it on my profile. And I just talked as anybody would talk who has the knowledge. And funny enough, I think I had 350,000 impressions on it and hundreds of comments. And then I used some of the time I had in the evening to answer basically any comment, even from trolls and haters, because I thought, do not give up. And this was, I haven't done that before, but I personally have to say, and I'm not looking at it now, what's happening, but this was exactly the right thing to do for me at the time, because it was an overwhelming response from the educated people around me who said, finally you are saying it, right? But this is not a recipe for somebody else. This was an ad hoc decision to tell the truth from my perspective, because I got bashed a lot because I'm a foreigner, right? I'm a wealthy person, very much in the public. So I thought, okay, why should I not tell the truth and see what happens? And actually what happened was, of course, a lot of hate also, which you always have if you say something public, but a lot of people turning and saying, oh, okay, that's fair, that's not how I saw it. And that's what I did. But I would not say that would be repeated, because this was a one-off.
Okay, so it's a one-off. But I will say it's very refreshing to have an airline CEO be there to address the public and to be able to interact to some extent, because I think, it feels like there's a lot of walls around someone who actually has the power to do something and not just a customer service agent. So I think that was great.
It was interesting. And Martin, what's funny is you noted that it was 2 a.m. in Montreal when that was happening. So funnily enough, and I'm just learning this now, but we were both in Montreal at exactly the same time. I have just returned yesterday, and I saw the tweets occurring at 2 o'clock in the morning, but of course I'm considering it was a very sociable hour in Riga that you were up. So the context, knowing that you were just down the street from me near to Airbus, wide awake with jet lag in the middle of the night, taking on the public, fact checking them and ultimately, as you say, there are certain truths, financial truths that about the company, that it must be frustrating when you see them being misrepresented online. So we did both respect the way in which you put yourself out there and directly were engaging, including engaging in Latvian, which we know you're not fluent in, but you were using the translate feature, which kind of blew the minds of a lot of people. They were tweeting you saying, so you do speak Latvian, and you were having to kind of screenshot and show your translate feature in action. I mean, this was quite an unusual scenario for us to have witnessed, but as you say, it kind of worked, right?
It worked, but I tell you, it was a hell of a job I did. And then, of course, you do typing mistakes, right? But you want to be fast, because I never did that before. I was so overwhelmed with all these answers coming in, and I wanted to answer everybody, and I had to always go translate. And then there's this funny function that you have to go back on the tweet to go again into the tweet before you see the translate button. And then the Latvian, as I don't understand Latvian, so I hoped that what was translated was what I wanted to have. It was very interesting, I have to say. It was like a very, very high level work to be done, because I really tried to go, it was a multiple tweet, I really tried to go answer by answer and answer something to it which would make sense. There were a few which I didn't answer, because I'm all for free speech, but then there's really sometimes things happening which are out of the norm. But even there was a guy who said they are trolls and they are doing this, and I said, then if you are trolls, you should know better, because you're doing this for profession. So I was even answering people who were really bad, because I thought, I'm telling the truth, right? So we all have one life, and we can decide of what we do at what time. Anybody could do that. And that was a moment where I decided I defend my company and my people and the truth, because this is why that platform is there and maybe controversially discussed, but the truth can be told, and I had to tell the truth. So that was this very unusual action from me, because I'm not going for clicks or whatever. I'm trying to inform a little bit on my X profile, so that I do this as a professional. But that was an exception. You never know. Maybe I do it again tomorrow, but I doubt it, because it was very time consuming.
Well, speaking of the plans, and this was mentioned in some of those public discussions. So the IPO of shares in Air Baltic is set to take place later this year. You've confirmed to other media, and after that takes place, the Latvian state is only going to keep around 25% of the company's shares. So if we look at that compared to where we are now, with the Latvian state owning 97.97% of Air Baltic, but after the IPO, that would drop down to 25%. Is this the moment, or will that be the moment, where the likes of Lufthansa, which I'm sure you are well aware have been already quoted in media, expressing their real interest in swooping up Air Baltic, will that be the moment where Air Baltic ultimately becomes part of someone, if not, but someone like the Lufthansa Group?
So first of all, on the IPO, I have to say what I always say: it can happen this year or next year. This statement stays, so we have not confirmed today, because we cannot. So be prepared that statement stays until the 31st of December, that it can happen this year, and then on the 1st of January, I will say it might happen in 25.
Okay.
On the states, that's one fact, and that is actually the truth today. As it was before, but people say it's happening. Especially my minister went out and said it's happening at this and this time without any base for it. But the second one is the share of the state. The next difficult thing, because I would never confirm anything which is discussed in a secret cabinet of ministers meeting, because you're not allowed to. But if a person from that meeting says something publicly, then I cannot deny or say yes or no. But also I can assure you that before you haven't even announced an IPO, that nobody can say what will be the shares of the existing shareholders. So that's part of the process, but it's another example of the lack of understanding of this process in the public. If we come to the last point, the speculation about Lufthansa, yes, I read it, and my media team said what I should say, and it says no comment. That's the two words I got for it, which this is all I can say. So therefore, I cannot, that now I come into this official position as being the CEO of a company, I cannot comment on speculation in the media, and therefore, unfortunately, as much as I would like to have a longer discussion on it, all I can say is that we are not commenting the speculation while we see it, of course.
Is that part of the complication? I note that you kind of mentioned that, while you are very much across of what is happening and the direction of Air Baltic, does it then negatively impact you when somebody from government perhaps open their mouth and with a little, inaccuracy, or perhaps a comment maybe a bit too hopeful, that triggers all these headlines, it riles up the public, they then think that there is some kind of hidden agenda, when actually it's probably down to, lack of communication or lack of what's being left in the room, supposed to be left in the room kind of thing?
Yeah, and I think any state, any national carrier goes through that in a privatization process, and that's what we're in, right? If we are doing an IPO, then this is a privatization process. To whatever extent the state will still stay in, and this causes between politicians who are normally only going for a 4-year term to make sure that they go for the next 4-year term, and that leads then sometimes for the more nervous ones to go out to the public and say something out of context. I would put it down this way, but in any nationalization of a state-owned carrier in Europe in the last 30 years, we saw the same issues. I try to stay on top of it. I'm 34 years in the industry now. I've been in a couple of companies, and I've been in a company which then was sold to Air Berlin, and it has been a big success. I've been in a state-owned company, Malev, which was, I think, turned around well, and then the EU decided that it has to repay, and it was shut down, unfortunately. But I've seen a lot. Here I try to be the calm person, the one in the center who gives the guidance. I cannot and don't want to do the work of the politicians. as they represent the shareholder, the majority shareholder, I do respect everything they say, but I do also keep the confidentiality. If they breach these kind of government meetings where they're discussing certain things, then that is something they have to live with. But I'm not a politician. I'm running a company which is actually not a state vehicle. It's a company which is run under private investors' principles, because we have also with the shareholders private investors here, and therefore I try to keep that line. But as you saw last week, it can be, especially in a smaller country, pretty tricky if politicians start doing politics around a company.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to go back. I'm not going to ask specifically about Lufthansa Group, but I am curious if you see any value in being part of a bigger airline group, whether that would be Lufthansa or IAG or Air France KLM. Would that be a good thing for Air Baltic in theory?
I answer it this way: you either become large enough to be your own group, or you become part of a group, and that is not a timing given here, but this is called consolidation. And if we look at the US, where we had that process happening a bit earlier, the same is happening here. So you have two ways out. You are large enough that you are your own group, or sooner or later you belong to a larger group. So we are doing both now. We are growing very fast, so we keep that option of being our own group, while 100 aircraft for sure is not enough. But we would also be then, of course, part of the consolidation, maybe with a more active role of having the right business model and the right size. So I don't say that we have to be part of a group, but I do see in Europe consolidation is needed. And if we look at what happened in the last few years, then it is also progressing. And therefore, I'm a realist on that. If we look at Wizz Air, I think they're large enough to be their own group, but you never know. It might even there, Norwegian, Ryanair, that they one day merge with each other, or become part, or EasyJet become part of one of the larger groups. So I think we will have the same in Europe that what happened in the US, and that is a natural process, and that is good. Air Baltic today is an independent airline doubling in size in the next 5 years with the most modern fleet and a unique concept, which hopefully investors say, okay, we believe in that and we can do a successful IPO and then grow on our own, and then we see the next steps.
It has a strong identity and a strong culture that has been integrated into the passenger experience, but also your cabin design. And there are various little quirks of Air Baltic that really you start to feel the different experience, or for your first time, if you're experiencing Latvia and traveling to Latvia, it's pretty strong and evident from the moment you board your aircraft. And that's in various different ways. And airlines that are able to achieve this, I think it's something that is a little refreshing, and not just the likes of the navy blues that we see, or the way in which, for example, the Lufthansa Group, speaking, a little bit blunt, the Lufthansa Group would be quite happy to have all of its airline subsidiaries operate as a kind of, the grey Lufthansa approach in terms of what things look like and the passenger experience and the touch. Are you able to commit to us now on the podcast that you will be able to protect the Air Balticness, the Latvian style and the small quirks in an Air Baltic that could eventually belong to an airline group?
I think yes, because we have a net promoter score reported of 66, which is double than what others report, the highest in Europe of any airline reporting a net promoter score. Why would anybody say we change that? And a good example there in the Lufthansa Group is actually Swiss, which is their, at least from public statements, the most profitable part they have. They are not changing anything in Swiss, because they do know that the airline with their unique brand and identity is exactly what they need to do what they do. And therefore, I do not see that as a threat at all, as long as Air Baltic, with our Air Baltic way, can keep what we do and making us so much liked. And the net promoter score speaks for itself. So I do not see that if you would belong to a group that you necessarily have to give up and do it as the group does it. But of course, similar to Swiss, you use all the benefits of a group, because there's lots of benefits if you belong to a larger group.
And Swiss have definitely been able to protect the Swissness of that brand. They have told me themselves over the years that it wasn't easy. And, you know, they were often in back and forth exchanges with head office in Germany about ensuring that the Swissness remains. But it is a solid example. So good. We're pleased to hear that commitment from you. Before we let you go, we have a small final segment. We want you to do a little quick fire with us where we're going to issue you with a few quick fire questions. Some of these were sent in by our most loyal listeners who were informed that we were going to be meeting with you today. And so we would like the first answers that come to your head, okay? Nothing too thought out. We've got a few. We'll take it in turns. Whatever comes to your head, we want to hear it. So I'll start. Firstly, can you give us 3 airlines that impress you in commercial air travel other than Air Baltic?
Swiss, JetBlue, Qantas.
Nice.
There would be many more, but these were the first 3 which I would see as a traveler who would impress.
Good.
That's great. Yeah, JetBlue is a nice one. What's the best airport in Europe, in your opinion, besides your Riga hub?
Munich.
What's the one thing you think Air Baltic does better than any other airline?
Customer service and the innovation spirit and the speed of implementing innovation.
Nice. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of Air Baltic's future?
Success.
What airline was the best long-haul flight you've ever experienced?
Qatar Airways in their premium cabin.
Yeah, that's a good one. What is your least favorite part of being an airline CEO?
Actually, there's no part. I really wake up in the morning in the biggest storms and love to do what I do. And I do not have that. People always say, are you not getting tired? But unfortunately, no. I really love the job with all the things, also the negativity, because it makes me grow.
Oh, that's great to hear. So what is your favorite thing about it?
Communication with people. So I don't like to be alone. So once I get into the company, lots of people say good morning to me.
Nice.
Martin, you're a well-traveled guy. What's the one country you haven't visited, but you want to?
Many, but one I definitely want to see in a city there is Ushuaia here in Argentina, because I really for many years want to go South America. So
Yeah.
that's, but there are many others, but that would be the one. If you say I have 2 weeks free and I have a free choice, that's the one.
Nice choice also. 2 more questions. To inspire us and our listeners, what is the best advice you've ever received? You might
Do not
need a
give
moment
up.
to think about it.
No, the best advice is, and that is actually more and more now needed in our world. I mean, there's lots of these bold statements, but do not give up. If you can say this to yourself again and again and again, you can come pretty far in your personal and in your business life.
That's great. And finally, and I know that you are very happy where you are today, but I will ask, what is next for you after Air Baltic, eventually?
The industry will decide, because I do not have a plan. My plan is to deliver the success, and at any time that is not wanted anymore from me, then the industry or the world will decide what I do next. I have never had a plan to do what I do next. It always happened to me, and I let it happen this way.
And we tend to hear that quite often. That's great. Martin, thank you for joining us on air. It's been a pleasure.
And a pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it is Q&A time, and I have a question here from Samuel. Don't think we forgot about you guys just because we had a guest episode today. So Samuel says, hi Dan, me again. I actually have a question for the podcast this time. I was wondering what your and Alex's opinions are on business/first class sleeping etiquette when it comes to clothing. At home, I would normally sleep topless, and when getting comfortable on the plane, the thought crossed my mind about doing the same. I didn't do it, but with the privacy we get from doors and enclosed suites, would this be acceptable? What do we think?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I mean, at first, I must admit, when you were reading this question, I was thinking, where is this going? But it's a valid point, especially if you're flying in premium cabins a lot. The whole idea is to be comfortable. And okay, I guess my answer on this is, I think if you're in something like an enclosed or semi-enclosed suite, like a Q suite, for example, then I don't think there's a major issue with it so long as you're using the blanket to cover. I just feel you being there totally, with your shirt off and the blanket not really covering is, if anything, just awkward for the crew, especially if it's, a female crew. It's probably just awkward for them, and they might not know where to look. And so I'm thinking, like, it's just a bit awkward. So when you're sleeping, I think if you're covered with a blanket, and by the way, you know what's funny? On a Qatar A380 business flight I've taken, I've had like 2 Australians who, were completely like, they didn't put pajamas on. No, they were, well, I don't know what was under. They had the blanket covering, but they removed their shirts, and they did not have the blanket covering the top half of their body. And when you walk past, it does look weird, because it just looks like it's wrong, and it looks like, ew, that's not appropriate in an aircraft in a public space. But that wasn't an enclosed suite, so if it was in a Q suite, I would never have known.
I'm actually so fascinated by your answer, because I feel like this is the first time ever I've had a more conservative take on a topic than you. I would say anytime sleeping in a public place,
you shouldn't.
You're not on the beach. I would say, like, at least wear a t-shirt and shorts.
Well, I said you at least have to cover with a blanket, right? So I don't.
Who knows what happens when you sleep? You might take the blanket off in your sleep.
Yeah, that's a risk. Yeah.
So I would say.
I mean, I wouldn't do it, but.
No, I know you wouldn't. But like, I would say bring comfortable athleisure, like a very soft, comfy t-shirt and shorts, and stick to that, because I just feel like it's really quite inappropriate to start undressing in any.
It is. You'd have to be in an enclosed. You'd have to be in Emirates first class, or.
But even then, I just feel like it's kind of.
But then, if the crew are going to come, it's like, it's also. Hold on, I'm assuming you're on bedding, right? That if you're on just the seat, don't do that. God.
Yeah, some sticky leather surf.
Yeah. Oh God, this is awful. Go on.
Anyway, so Samuel, unfortunately, I would definitely say wear a t-shirt. And I think also, like, I would be mortified if someone recognized me and I was sleeping in my underwear or something on a plane. No, thank you. So let's see here. Vigo says, love this. He says, hi Dan, I have a question and an idea for you and your guest host, Alex. Thank you so much, Vigo. If you could combine first class cabins from different airlines, I think I would take the seat from Singapore Airlines A380 and the bathroom from Emirates. Would be really fun to know how you two would think. All right. So what would we combine to make the perfect cabin using existing products? What about you?
Singapore first class on the A380.
Mm-hmm. And like
Emirates bathroom with the shower. No, Etihad residence bathroom with the shower.
Well, it's technically. I think it would be hard.
Excuse me.
Cabin.
It's allowed. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So, Singapore first class suite, Etihad shower, Qatar food and service. What else?
What about like a bar? I guess you.
Oh yeah. I prefer I think the bar space on Qatar's A380s, I think they're better than the Emirates A380 bar, because I just think I don't like the location of the Emirates A380 bar. I think it's just when the crew are walking through constantly with trays, it makes me feel like I'm standing in a place that's kind of the galley rather than a very still space that the lounge on QR.
Yeah. Okay. I love this question. I would also I think anyone would take the Singapore Airlines A380 seats, so you can open it up and share it with someone else. The Emirates first class shower spas, honestly, listen, they are so much more spacious and luxurious even than the Etihad residence bathroom. They're massive. You know how big the bathroom is. They also like extend it forward, so you have the shower there. Great. I would also choose Emirates catering personally, because I think it's probably the best vegan airline catering in the world out of Dubai. But then I agree with you. I would choose the Qatar Airways bar. I think it's nice that the bar divides it so you're not staring at the people on the other side of the cabin. So you kind of have your side, which I think is nice. And it's
True.
the ceiling at the Qatar Airways A380 bar is, wow, amazing, right? The lamps.
Yeah,
So
the lamps.
cool.
The interiors are beautifully designed. Really, really nice.
Yeah, it is. So Khalil asks, potential question for the goat of podcasts, perhaps. Oh, that's so nice.
Whoa, we're Ronaldo.
Very nice. So you and Alex are tasked with forming the 4th major airline alliance using
God.
only airlines that aren't already members of the big 3.
Oh, forget it. I don't want the
love
leftovers. I don't want the leftovers.
There's so many good leftovers. Emirates is a leftover. JetBlue is a leftover. We could
Whoa.
alliance.
I wanted to say JetBlue. Now you've taken my one. Now there's nobody left.
It sucks the Virgin just joined SkyTeam.
Yeah,
'Cause
true.
otherwise, can you imagine an alliance with Emirates, Virgin, JetBlue? It would be just such a vibe. And then let's think about Asia. What? Starlux? Add them in the mix.
Starlux. Who
Yeah.
else?
Most big airlines there. I guess we could add Philippine Airlines. Why not?
In the spirit of today's episode, we'll pop in Air Baltic. That's fine.
Yeah, of course. To have some, good regional connectivity in Europe.
Yeah.
So here's
Maybe Air Tahiti.
Yeah, that's good. So here's one. What do we think about adding something like EasyJet to an alliance?
I think in order to facilitate quick, easy European connections, I'd have them in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're good. Do you remember? I don't know if they still have that thing, EasyJet Worldwide or the World
I
by
remember
EasyJet.
with Norwegian, right? They were shut up.
Yeah. Oh, so of course that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, that was with Norwegian. But also, does the partnership still exist between EasyJet and Emirates?
Ooh, I have no idea.
I used to redeem Skywards miles on flights, on EasyJet flights between Stansted and Malaga.
Yeah. That's actually crazy.
I think I was the only person that ever did that. Yeah, back when I was a kid.
Okay, a few other airlines, by the way. We should add.
WestJet?
Sure, yeah, WestJet. Let's add Riyadh Air, of course. Let's add Airlink in South Africa
Oh, good one.
and get some nice connectivity there. Why not Air Mauritius as well to get some more sprawling connectivity?
I still feel like the table's not cool enough. I know it's all right, and you're trying to convince me, but I feel like we're if we're sitting at a wedding table that's like missing the big players. I'm like
No.
looking over, and I'm like, I want to be over there where there's
Not at all. And
The one word
seriously,
carriers.
an alliance that had even what were the
it's
first
true.
I said? Emirates, JetBlue, and
We said JetBlue. We said Starlux.
also
we
LATAM
said
we need because they're
Let's
alliance.
Ham. Okay, now we're getting strong.
This is a
Yeah.
good global alliance that
Yeah,
I think a lot
it's
of
the
people
on-air
like.
alliance.
Virgin Australia down under.
Fiji will put you in there as well.
Well, there aren't they joining One
Oh
World
no, it's One World
officially?
Connect, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Okay.
But I think we have a nice alliance going. Let's do this.
We've got all of South America. Do we have an airline from North America? Yes, we have JetBlue. Do we have an
And
airline from Canada? Yes,
WestJet.
we have WestJet. Okay. We've got Starlux doing the Asia part for us. We probably need
We could
another
add
Asian
Caribbean
carrier.
Airlines to have the Caribbean covered because they're
Okay.
decent.
Caribbean Airlines.
Starlux
Fiji,
Philippines.
Starlux Philippines. What
I mean,
about AirAsia?
Oh, actually,
Oh,
AirAsia is
that's
not a bad
good.
idea because
That's good because then we've got like the EasyJet of Asia and the EasyJet of Europe as well.
yeah, and to be honest, AirAsia is
I know.
better than many full service airlines in
Yeah.
other parts of the world.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Oh, oh no, they're in Star Alliance. Okay, I got excited. Never mind.
Which airline were you thinking?
I wanted to say ANA, and then I was like, oh no, they're in
Oh,
Star.
I know. I think
Yeah.
that would be epic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Air Astana. Let's add them into the mix.
Air Astana, very good. Air Baltic as well. We've got Air Astana covering us in Central Asia. Air Baltic, the little airline that could for the Baltic states for connectivity there with a nice aircraft order.
And how about just to throw something wild into the mix, we add
on.
like Mahan Air. I'm joking, but
No, we don't want to be sanctioned.
yeah.
There are various sanctions going on there.
mean, I
couple
think-
more before we.
Surely
Yeah.
there's not many more alliance-less airlines that are of interest.
I mean, we'd take EasyJet rather than taking Wizz, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't stand Wizz.
I know.
Because I tell you why I can't stand it, because it's just horror story after horror story in my emails of people who have been ripped off left, right, and center
Yeah.
and are out of pocket because they don't pay compensation. They lie about the reason for their delays. It's just, I understand why investigation after investigation has been opened into the, business of Wizz Air, because they're ripping people off. It's robbery, it's theft.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
why.
true. Two more amazing additions. I just thought of Iceland Air. Hello.
I thought of Iceland Air and I was thinking, are they stuck? Yes, Iceland Air, definitely. So look at us with transatlantic options.
Yeah, and why not? This is sneaky and would never happen. But Aer Lingus is not in an alliance.
Isn't Aer Lingus in one word?
No, they're not. That's the crazy thing, which I have no idea why, but they are not officially a One World member. So there you go. Are you Googling right now?
No, I'm checking when here we go. Aer Lingus to join One World. When?
But it's just, they keep postponing it.
Oh,
So
yeah,
there's no real-
2025 maybe, yeah. Because I remember seeing that they're Okay, yeah, all right, we'll take them. I mean, they're a bit hostile to you when you last flew them.
I know. But now we have a very well-rounded global alliance.
There we go.
And we're all happy. So that's it for today's episode, guys. Thank you for joining us. And of course, above all, thank you, Martin, for joining us. I think we had such a great conversation, right?
It was really insightful, really interesting, and we look forward to witnessing the continued growth there. And also, I like the fact that he's super upfront about the challenges, not that just the airline faces, but that he is facing personally, being so public at the top of the airline that is a taxpayer-funded airline, so really does hit the headlines when there is any kind of negative perception as to the ongoing of business. So it's nice to have someone directly confront all of that, rather than many of these CEOs who just never even see make a public appearance, let alone join a podcast and discuss it openly and describe it as a shitstorm.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we will see you all next week on air. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. See you later.